This is Morgan Hazelwood, back again with more writing tips and writerly musings. Today, I'm here to share with you how to find an agent for your novel. Now, I talk a lot about my querying process, but one thing I haven't focused on as much is how to find the agent to query in the first place. Well, it takes a bit of research, but most of us writers are pretty comfortable with research, especially if it means that we're putting our manuscript in front of the right person. It's a little time consuming, but ultimately not usually challenging. So step one, pick a list of literary agents. So Morgan, where do I find this list? This is why I'm here. Well, all over the place. The main places I look for literary agents are the Guide to Literary Agents 2016. I've got an out-of-date copy. You can find it on Amazon and bookstores, at your local library, on Kindle. It's fine if it's a little out of date. The manuscriptwishlist.com. It's also associated with the Twitter hashtag MSWL. Now, the Twitter hashtag isn't as well curated, but the website is at least lightly vetted. Querytracker.net. This is a website that writers use to track their queries, their response rates, and more. But you can also find agents here. Their search feature is pretty capable. And you can see what other writers have said about working with them in the past and how many people they request pages from. Your genre magazine. Yes, they probably print a magazine for your genre. I write fantasy. It's YA fantasy, but it's still sci-fi fantasy. So I subscribe to Locus Magazine, LOCUS. It tells me what books have sold, who sold them. It has interviews with agents and writers and publishers and just gives me industry news. Another place to look is, of course, Publishers Weekly. It's a little more general, but it's got all the book deals out there that are being made in the traditional world and the small publishing world. Another place to look is your bookshelf. Open a book that you love in the same genre of your manuscript, preferably and published in the last 3 to 5 years, and see who they think, see who their agent is. And of course, there's always just Google. Look for literary agent. Step 2, make sure they represent your genre. When you're looking at the list, if your genre is not something they represent, you're just asking for a short trip to the head of their form letter rejection queue. Now, feel free to add all the agents that you do qualify for their, area of expertise. Add as many as you want to your query list. I suggest creating a large list and ranking them from 1 to 3. It can take up to 100 no's before you get that yes. Just ask J.K. Rowling, and her book didn't do half bad. So for me, ones are agents whose bios spoke to me, who listed some of my comps as their favorite books, or a theme that I use in my story is something that they've mentioned they're looking for. All of these can be indicators that this agent might be right for me. 2s are the agents who sound up my alley, but didn't have any specific requests that matched up with my manuscript. And my 3s are the agents who represent my genre, but didn't really say anything I connected with. But then again, they also didn't say anything that they disliked that my manuscript does contain. Don't try and be like, oh, it's got this, but it doesn't count. If they say they don't like something, don't waste their time on querying them. So the problem with a lot of my level 3 agents are their bios just really don't say a lot about them. And they could be amazing, but they just aren't using their bios to their full potential, kind of like Match.com, because a lot of these lists are just agent names and genres. And worse, sometimes these lists are out of date. So that brings us to step 3. No matter where you got their name from, go to their agency website, visit their profile, and read it. No, really, read it with your eyes. Often this is where you're going to find that list of preferences, their tastes, their favorite books. This is where you really get a feel for their personalities, so you can evaluate if you feel that they'd make a good match for you. You can use this information to help rank them. Plus, you can find out about their experience level. Are they young and hungry? Where did they work before? Do they talk about editorial feedback, or are they just going to start selling your book out the door? Are they experienced and only take the rarest of new writers? Do they want to sell a book or start a partnership that will last throughout your writing career? All of these are things you're going to want to think about. And most importantly, are they open to queries currently? If they're not open to queries, just put them on the back burner and leave them alone until they're ready for you. Step 4, vet them. Once you've decided an agent sounds good to you, don't stop there. Check out both the agent and their agency. You can look on Writers Beware. It has a lot of information about vanity presses, scams, fly-by-night shops that don't necessarily deliver what they promise, etc. There's also Query Tracker, again, querytracker.net, and other writers will share their success rates and their experiences with that agent. However, not all writers use querytracker.net. It's self-reporting, so not having a profile isn't necessarily a red flag, but if they do have any red flags, you'll be able to see many of them there. And you can just plain out Google them. You can check their blog and their Twitter, see where they are on the internet, and see if anyone has had good, bad, or mediocre experiences with them in the past. So when it comes to looking at the agencies, some agencies are just glamorized vanity presses. You give them money, they print your books for you. Remember, you should never pay to be traditionally published, ever. Now, some agencies simply basically help you self-publish. If you're self-publishing or indie publishing, you might end up paying out of pocket for an editor, cover art, formatting for both print and ebooks. You have to decide if it's worth it to you to pay to have someone else do it for you. Editing and cover, you're definitely going to want a professional. Remember that lackluster sales for self-published work or small published work or even traditional work, if your first book has lackluster sales, you're going to have trouble selling your next book. If you're a blow-away success, of course, finding a publisher or agent is not going to be hard, but the number of people who have gotten a book deal, indie, self-publishing can be counted about on one hand. So, step 5, how do you decide who on this giant list of 100 agents to query first? Well, it's recommended to send out queries in batches of 5 to 10. I'm a little conservative, so I do 3 to 5, but that's just me. For an untested query, I like to do a mix of 1s and 2s. I feel the 1s are stronger matches, but I don't want to use a query that's untested on all my 1s and stack up a pile of form rejections just because I have a bad query. So, because once you query and they say no, unless you substantially revise your manuscript, not your query letter, not your synopsis, your actual story, you're not supposed to requery. If you do, you can find yourself blacklisted for that agent, and they're probably going to tell other agents. However, if you're getting a lot of form rejections, that is a sign that you should look at your query and opening pages and rework them Just don't send them back to the agents that already said no. So, step 6, follow their submission guidelines. Now, I'm assuming before you even get to this step, you've already written your novel, edited it, revised it, and gotten feedback at least twice before you even thought about submitting. If it takes even more rounds of beta readers and revisions, that's fine, especially for a first-time novelist. You only get one debut novel. That's why it's called a debut. You should, at this point, have already written your query letter, keeping it under 300 words at least, and preferably under 250, concentrating your query on the emotional arc of the main character or characters. Character wants something, but something stands in their way. Before you query, you should have created your synopsis. All these things might be part of the standard submission package. So, how do you know what the agent's going to want, though? They all want different things. Well, go to the agency website, click the submissions tab, read the directions, and follow them. All of them are different. It's going to take a little bit of legwork, but this is how you query. This is how it works. So, plus, their guidelines are kind of a test. If you ignore their directions, they're going to assume you're a pain in the butt to work with. They get dozens of queries a day, people pounding down their door just to get the chance to work with them. You just made it really easy for them to tell you no. Now, once you go to the submission guidelines, you're going to read it, and some of them are going to want you to fill out a web form. Some are going to only accept snail mail queries, and some want you to email a specific email address. So 99% of email submissions do not accept attachments. Often web forms won't as well. What you're gonna do is copy and paste pages or chapters, depending on how much they ask for, into the query or the section of the form after the query, if it's in an email, directly in there. If they ask for 30 pages or 3 chapters, give them whichever is longer, as long as it's not like 300-page chapters. And when you email them, make sure to spell the agent's name right. Don't ask me how I know this one. And that's it. Now you know how to choose an agent to query. Best of luck in the query trenches.
And that's all for today. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and share it with all your friends. It goes a long way towards helping people find me. And I'll be back again next Monday with more writing tips and writerly musings. Bye-bye.